We're a few weeks into the postseason at this point, and we've already watched several teams come and go, getting eliminated and sent home from the bubble. There have, without question, been some major surprises in the playoffs so far. We've seen some guys emerge in a big way and surprise a lot of people with how well they've played, and on the flip side of things, we've seen a fair share of disappointing performances from teams and individual players where they did not live up to their expectations. This brings us to the topic of today's video, as we will be discussing 6 players in particular that had the expectations of star player-esque production and were needed to play at a high level in order for their teams to get where they wanted to go, but they either came up short, or if they're still playing, are coming up short. Before we start though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. To start things off, the first player that has been a pretty big disappointment in the playoffs so far is Paul George of the Clippers. He infamously gave himself the nickname of Playoff P, and when you do something like that, you're basically welcoming criticism when you play poorly. The Clippers are up in their series against Denver right now, and they eliminated the Mavericks in 6 games in the first round, but in general, the Clippers haven't looked quite as dominant as many thought they would look, and George's struggles have definitely contributed to that. In the 6-game series against Dallas, he posted averages of 18.5 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists while shooting an abysmal 36% from the field and 28% from 3. In many of the games, he struggled mightily with his shot, and the series was a lot more difficult because of it. He has admittedly played better so far in the series against Denver currently, as he's now coming off of a 32-point outing where he was really playing well and helped lead them to a close win down the stretch, so hopefully that's a positive sign for him being able to turn things around. The Clippers have championship aspirations, and they'll need him to be at the top of his game if they want to reach that, but so far his playoff production hasn't quite been up to par. The next player we'll be discussing that has just been eliminated well short of he and his team's goals is Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Bucks. When you win both Defensive Player of the Year and the MVP award, which hasn't been made official yet but we all know he's going to win it, you get held to the highest standard possible whether you think it's fair or not, and getting eliminated in the second round while not playing nearly as well as he's capable of playing results in him landing on this list. It started in Game 1 when he avoided defending Jimmy Butler while he was on fire scoring 40 points, and from there it's only gotten worse. He did get injured in Game 4 of the series against the Heat, but an injury simply just is not an excuse for this, because by that point the Bucks were already down 3-0 in the series and on the brink of elimination. His scoring dipped big time because his lack of shooting ability made it easier to slow him down in half-court settings. Bam Adebayo did a phenomenal job defending him, and down the stretch he wasn't as impactful as an MVP is expected to be. The next player we'll be discussing that has disappointed throughout the postseason is Pascal Siakam of the Toronto Raptors. Siakam was an integral part of the Raptors' championship run last year after having broken out onto the scene and taking home the Most Improved Player award, but with Kawhi Leonard gone this year, he stepped into a bigger role. Throughout the regular season, he looked as ready as ever to take over as the star of the show, and he took another big leap forward as a player individually, but the playoffs are a completely different beast, and with more focus being on him in this postseason than last, he might not have been ready for it. He played alright against the Nets on the way to a first-round sweep, but against an actual contender in the Celtics, he has undoubtedly struggled. In the 5 games played in the series so far, he's only topped 20 points one time, and his averages of 16 points and 7 rebounds, while shooting 40% from the field and 15% from 3, really stick out like sore thumbs. He typically does an excellent job getting out in transition and using his speed to create mismatches, but when the game slows down, he has really struggled to find a way to be effective, as his perimeter jumper hasn't been falling and the Celtics have seemed to figure out how to stop his patented spin move in the post. Up next on this list of players that disappointed in the playoffs is Tobias Harris of the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, I realize that Harris really isn't categorized as a star player, but in the offseason he was paid like one, so he's going to be held to some pretty high standards. In fact, even if he wasn't held to these standards and was only held to average standards, he still wouldn't have played the part this postseason. He was brought to the team and paid handsomely for his ability to shoot the basketball and handle a secondary scoring load, explode, but in the first round against the Celtics, he averaged a measly 15 points per game while shooting 38% from the field and 13% from three, which is enough to give any Sixers fan a headache. He went completely ghost in the first 3 games of the series, shooting it poorly and barely contributing on either end, and when he finally put together a 20-point outing in Game 4, it was already too late and the team got swept. There's a lot of talk about who has the worst contract in the NBA right now, and Harris just staked a very compelling claim for that label. Speaking of which, the next player we'll be discussing is actually a teammate of Harris, being Al Horford. Horford has made a career for himself as being a star who does all of the little things on both ends of the floor that winning teams need. He plays very good defense, and his versatility on offense was supposed to be seamless for the Sixers. All offseason long, the front office told fans that the addition of Horford was built on the fact that they were trying to build a team for the playoffs that would overwhelm opponents with their size. But the reality of the situation is that signing him marked the beginning of the end of everything, and it came crashing down on them. The spacing of the Sixers lineups were horrendous. Horford was obviously someone who lost a step on both ends of the floor and isn't reliable enough to play power forward alongside Embiid, and he just really never managed to fit in well. In the playoffs, he scored in single digits in 3 of the 4 games against Boston, which is obviously disappointing by any standard. I mentioned that Tobias Harris might have the worst contract in the NBA, but the Sixers front office managed to sign 2 contenders for that title in the same offseason because Horford is right there with him. And finally, the last player we'll be discussing that has had a disappointing postseason so far is Russell Westbrook of the Houston Rockets. Westbrook is always a polarizing player year in and year out, and this year is no different. The Rockets gave up a lot to get him to Houston, and so far that investment isn't really paying off. He's supremely talented, and his combination of speed and explosiveness is always something at his disposal, but it's often his decision-making and shot selection that get him into trouble, and that has definitely been the case this year. Turnovers have plagued him because he gets so out of control without a real plan for where he's going to pass it. He falls in love with pull-up jumpers that haven't been falling, and he's still not playing efficient basketball. James Harden gets double-teamed regularly, which should make his life a lot easier against less pressure, but whenever Harden goes to the bench, the Rockets have struggled. Russ is only averaging 18 points in the playoffs, making 42% of his shots and 23% of his threes, and outside of solely just numbers, the eye test would convince anyone watching that he needs to improve. The Rockets are by no means out of it versus the Lakers right now, and have played them close in all 3 games, but if they want to actually win the series, they need more from Westbrook, and that includes playing more under control and converting the open looks he gets. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below any other big name players you think have disappointed in the playoffs. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.